Hi. Okay, so I am just seeing that for some reason we are not streaming on LinkedIn. So I would like to invite everyone to just go to YouTube um, and watch the event there. We will put the link in the comments, and you'll be able to watch it there. I don't know what happened. I'm very sorry. When I clicked on go live, I just saw that it's not streaming, so I have no idea what's going on and why this is happening. Okay, so let's start and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say, I'm very, very happy to be hosting this event today because I have a very special colleague of mine here with me, Nevena. Hi, Nevena. So, in this session, we will talk about the most effective ways to communicate with tax authorities, as you can see from the title of this event. As for the retail talks, we are live every second Tuesday at 3 p.m. We are streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube. I mean, we're usually streaming on LinkedIn. Today, we're not. I'm sorry for this. I don't know what happened. But yes, so LinkedIn and YouTube. So this event is also always recorded, so you can always watch it later. And the next one will be on July 19th. Now, I would like to tell you a little bit about Fiscal Solutions as a company and give you some insights about a little bit about our history and how it all started. So we are 18 years old, and it all actually started with fiscal reports in Romania. And now we are active in 17 different countries. As for our products, we have 4 of them. So the first one is Internet Portal, where we publish documentation, news, and alerts about fiscal countries. The second one is Workshop about country requirements. Third product is our own middleware that implements fiscal requirements of the mentioned 17 countries. And also the fourth product is Fiscal Help Desk, which offers fiscal support for your local business, which we actually call a fiscal hotline. But this is not all. I know that maybe you thought that I would finish here with telling you what we have to offer, but we actually have to offer more. And this being said, I'd like to mention our involvement with the Web3 space, because this is something very special for us. As we like to think of ourselves as an innovative company, we started educating ourselves with the Web3 space, because a lot of our clients started asking us what to do with Web3. So we thought, okay, we need to step it up and educate ourselves so we can offer services in this department as well. From this, Ape School was created, and we are one of the first companies, maybe even the first company in the world, I don't know, that started first educating ourselves about fiscalization in Web3, and now we are teaching about it as well. So far, Ape School has successfully executed 2 masterclasses. One was in Serbian and the other one in English, where we taught about basic Web3 concepts such as blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and so on. But what makes masterclasses and our offerings in general, when it comes to Web3, so special is 2 things. Firstly, we teach you how to not get scammed, because Web3 is still quite a new concept. And meaning that we actually focus on security. And the other aspect is the business side of our masterclass, which means that we help you notice and use the opportunities for business within Web3 space. Now, our Ape School team has 7 people, and we are currently preparing our big NFT collection. We're very, very excited about it. It's called, actually it's already called, because we already have some NFTs ready. Masters of Blockchain, and it will be minted in August. So, my message is stay tuned. There are a lot of interesting things coming. Okay, now that I said a little bit about Fiscal Solutions, our products, and our Web3 teachings and masterclass, let's move on to us, Nevena.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my guest today. So as I already told you, I love Nevena. She's actually, as you can see, very sweet looking, but don't let that fool you. Nevena is actually, she's extremely smart and very professional.
Oh,
Yeah, and that before this live event was actually supposed to be hosted by my colleague Theodora, but she had some unforeseeable circumstances, and the hosting gig had to be transferred to me. And Nevena said we are meant to work on these live events together because we already held a couple of live events together in the past in our webinar Taxes and Metaverse, actually.
yes, obviously it's meant to be.
It's meant to be, yeah. And I love working with Nevena. I won't say anything more. I would just like to say that you should definitely take a look at her LinkedIn profile. I will put the link in the comments after I finish talking. And I suggest that you take a look at her LinkedIn profile because she posts some very useful and interesting articles on different legal topics. Nevena, now do you want to introduce yourself?
I mean, how can I add something substantial to how you've already introduced me? I mean, that was wonderful, but I can shortly say that I work as a legal consultant at Fiscal Solutions. So law is, of course, what I'm passionate about, and I like to apply it to different areas of life, to fiscalization, to Web3, among other things, to intellectual property. So thank you for mentioning my LinkedIn profile. People can see about the things that I write. But right now, I'm going to try to talk about something within our scope, something that is related to taxes, and hopefully you'll find it insightful or helpful for you for future communication with the tax authorities.
Thank you. As you can see, I put the link to Nevena's LinkedIn profile in the comments. Actually, all of the links that I am going to put in the comments. Also, I'm going to put some links where you can inform yourself about our master classes, our NFT collection, which I talked about just before. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Anna, and I am actually a marketing assistant at Fiscal Solutions. I don't like talking about myself, but if I had to, I like to consider myself both creative and serious at the same time, which actually means that the combination of marketing and fiscalization is a perfect mix for me. And I really enjoy doing these live events where I can hear from you guys. I'm talking to you guys as in the audience. So feel free to comment whatever you like about the topic, about the weather, about whatever you want. we're here to read your comments and to answer them. So feel free to put them in the chat box. Okay, so why are we talking about this topic, about different ways of communicating with tax authorities? Well, in general, we talk about fiscalization, and fiscalization is our passion, so to speak. So we must talk about tax authorities as well because they're part of fiscalization, and you can't really regard tax authorities separate from fiscalization. It's also a public institution, so that means that it requires special ways of communication in order to get the best information possible. And of course, who better to talk about these kind of topics than our experts? So why are our tips so special, Nevena? What do you think?
I love how you call them special. But they are in a certain way. I think I like to think of them as of tips that are optimized for the communication strategies that the tax authorities use. Like just like we have our objectives when we communicate with tax authorities, they have their own. They want to be efficient. They want to provide us regular and timely responses. They want to give us clarity. And although that doesn't seem like it's the truth in practice always, I think it's mainly because they face certain challenges as well. So, for example, tax authorities across the world sometimes face understaffing challenges. They have to work with regulation that is not necessarily adequate, with legislation that is constantly changing. And then if you add this sense of urgency that the taxpayers are creating by asking questions in the last minute before the changes go into motion, like I understand why, because non-compliance leads to frequent audits, to penalties. I understand why they need fast responses, but tax authorities really find it challenging to keep up with these changes. And not just the tax authorities, the legislators, the taxpayers, businesses, including us. So sometimes when we send them these emails, when we communicate our challenges with them, we sometimes do give them ideas on which things they need to discuss internally and which issues they need to resolve. So this is kind of the importance of the communication that we have with the tax authorities. So once we figure out why we are doing certain things a certain way, we can figure out how to effectively formulate and convey these messages that we send to the tax authorities.
Yeah, thank you for this brief introduction. So now let's just move on to our 5 tips. I am very excited to hear where you're going to advise our audience on how to communicate with tax authorities. I have to admit that I looked a little bit about what you're going to talk about before, and I have to say it's actually very, very useful, very clear. So, take the stage and just explain everything right away.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think partially it's going to be advice and partially it's going to be a recommendation, but I'll try to give some actionable tips, something you can really work with instead of something general and vague. So, the first tip that I would like to give you is to get to the point fast. So the reason why I say get to the point fast is because tax authorities often receive hundreds of messages per day. Of course, this is not official statistic. This isn't something I can vouch for in every country for every tax authority, but I can speak from a personal experience. Let's say recently I've sent 2 emails to tax authorities in Serbia within 2 consecutive days. And what happens is that we receive this automated message with a signed ticket number. And looking at this number, I could tell that 300 messages were sent in between my emails. So we know that they're receiving a large influx of messages. And we know that they are also understaffed to deal with them because we've attended different webinars that were held by people who work at tax authorities. And they've told us, yes, we have assigned extra people to these tasks now that we have some upcoming changes, but it's still not enough. And there are many reasons why there's not enough staff. I won't go into them, but one of the reasons is because taxpayers do tend to wait till the last moment before the changes go into the motion to send all of their questions at once. They tend to wait till the end of the grace period. So the first thing I would say that you can do to get an answer is to anticipate, to try to anticipate which issues may arise. And this doesn't just apply to fiscalization, to taxes. I think you can apply this, let's call it sort of stance, to everything in life, that if the first time you're thinking about a problem, when the problem arises, then you're probably already too late and potentially in trouble. And if you know that the changes are coming up, try to be proactive. And I know I am aware that this is easier said than done. We've been working in the area of fiscalization for years, so this is easier for us. But if you have any touch point with fiscalization, you certainly have some knowledge, some experience to anticipate the following issues, at least to some extent. And even if you can't anticipate, as soon as the problem arises, try to quickly communicate your issue with the tax authorities. Don't wait for the problem to escalate. Um, and apart from that, I would also say try to be direct. And what I mean by being direct, I mean ask the key question first, and then if you have to, provide details. So um, don't deviate from your main question too much, or don't provide too many unnecessary details, because you may confuse the tax authorities in regards to what are you actually seeking clarity on. So choose the question that is most important to you and try to stick to that one question. The way we do it at Fiscal Solutions, we try to ask questions such as, is something mandatory? Is something optional? Does it affect something important to us? For example, does this change of legislation affect electronic fiscal devices? Is it legally allowed? Is it forbidden? So I think you can probably tell by the way we phrase these questions that we like those yes or no answers, because they are clear and they give us clarity. However, that doesn't mean that we don't like explanations which follow the yeses or nos, because when you have an explanation, you can see the kind of logic that the tax authorities use. And when you know the logic behind the way they're thinking, then you can apply it to another question that we have. We can apply it to solutions to other issues that we have. And as a last sort of, let's say, bullet point within this tip, I'd say try to be concise. Initially, I wanted to say be brief, but I don't think that all ideas and that all issues can be clearly communicated in just one paragraph. So I think what's more important is to be concise. And what that means is that you need to master the art, and I truly mean that it is art, of giving a lot of information in very few words. So I think I could wrap that up in this tip
Yeah,
number.
because you're basically you run the risk of losing their attention and
Yes,
not getting answers. Yeah, because if you write long emails, they're gonna get lost and confused, not gonna answer all of your questions.
yes, and I bet you probably know this as a marketing specialist. You know this kind of thing, like with
Yeah,
copywriting, copywriting, how important it is
that's
to
true.
grab the attention of
That's
your
true.
audience. Yeah,
Always start with what you want and then explain it later.
exactly. See, this can be applied not only to
Yeah,
email communication with tax authorities, it can be applied to any sort of communication in any industry. If you want to extract certain information, start with the key points.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, thank you. And what about the next tip?
Yes.
So the next tip is also deals with explanations.
Yes. I like how you summed it up so well.
Yeah.
So the next step really, let's say, connects to the first one, and that is to provide context. And there are two reasons why I think this is so important. One is because tax authorities do prioritize the questions that they receive. They will flag some questions as more important than others. For example, if your question is time sensitive, if it's asking for the kind of information that you can't find easily on Google or anywhere else, you're more likely to get a response to that kind of question. And the context that you provide, which in your email can help you get the fast response from another perspective, which is that in certain tax authorities, they have separate teams that handle separate questions. For example, a team for legal questions, a team for technical questions, for different tax-related questions. So if you provide enough context in your email, they can know to which team to forward those emails, and then you can, of course, get the response faster. So to give some actionable tips, again, within providing context tip, I'd say the first thing I would consider is whether I should introduce myself. So use that opening section of your email to decide whether you should say which category of taxpayers are you coming from, which type of business activities are you conducting, which industry are you working in. Some tax authorities are even more keen to respond to natural persons as opposed to companies, or the other ways around. So you have to decide which kind of information will you begin your email with. And unfortunately, I can't say to this tax authority in this country, you should provide this sort of information, or you should present yourself as a natural person or as a company. I think this is a test and trial kind of thing. You just have to try it out for yourself and see what works best for you and for the kind of information that you're trying to extract. So, and keep in mind that providing this sort of information can also make it easier for tax authorities to find your email. For example, um, as I've said, they receive hundreds of emails. They have an archive of those emails. And maybe today you've asked them a question that they don't know an answer to. Maybe within 7 days, they will know the answer to that question. And if you've provided enough context, for example, if you told them from which company are you coming, maybe in 7 days they'll remember, oh, this company asked this question. They can type the name of the company in the search bar, and they can go back and easily find and respond to that email. So it's really important to introduce yourself when that benefits you. And also, I think this is an extension of this recommendation, that is to provide some background on how your issue has happened and give more context on the issue, but make sure that you're providing only the essential details. So you don't necessarily need to give them step-by-step rundown of what has happened to you. Just stick to these essentials, and be mindful of what the context is, what kind of information is the context providing to the tax authorities. Because if you're saying the name of your company and your context is explaining a situation that is potentially subject to penalties, maybe it is a punishable act, you don't want to give them personal information to identify you as somebody who has committed a punishable act. So just be mindful, what kind of information are you pairing up and offering to the tax communication, to the tax authorities in tax communication. So in those situations when you have sensitive questions that are in these, let's say, gray areas, I would say use fictional examples, present them as hypotheticals. And lastly, I would say try to steer away from redundancy. And what I mean by that is, don't repeat yourself too much. Um, if I'm using Fiscal Solutions email to send in a question, I probably don't need to waste too much space introducing myself and my company, especially in countries where the tax authorities are familiar with us. We communicate with them on a daily basis. They know who we are, and I probably won't go into the introduction of the company for too long. Instead, I'll just stick to the key questions and the essential details. And also, I try not to rephrase my questions too many times in a single email, because it may confuse the tax authorities as to what am I actually seeking clarity on. It can add to the confusion, and it can impact the readability of the question, which is something that we've discussed. Yeah, the readability, I think it's important, and it's something that I'll emphasize in the future tips as well.
Okay, and what about what about emails? Is it important how they visually look,
Well, I
what they
do.
look like?
Yes, yes, it is. And I think that that's a great transition to the tip number three. That's smart of you. Yes, so tip number three, organize and format your emails. Great stuff, Anna. So I I personally think that formatting your emails plays an important role in readability. So you want to ensure that whoever is reading your email can clearly understand the thoughts, the ideas, the challenges that you're trying to communicate. So try to avoid misunderstandings. If, for example, you write a confusing question and the tax authority responds to it and that response is not relevant to you, or if it's insufficient, then the thing that you have to do is to write a question again. So you are adding more time to waiting to receive the question, and that's what we want to avoid. So we can avoid that by organizing and formatting our emails. And what goes into this is, well, number one, of course, we have to send the email to somebody. So we have to identify who the right recipient is. So the way you can do this, you can maybe go on the official website of the tax authority that you want to communicate with, and you can see whether they have separate emails for legal teams, separate emails for technical teams. Sometimes they even have a separate email for different tax related questions. They have it separated in different tax categories. Um, or maybe they simply have one universal email for all the questions. So I'd say that if you categorize your question right, and if you address it to the right person, to the right team, then you've done half of the job. Um, then, of course, once you identified who to communicate with, you have to do something with the subject line. And I think a lot of people forget how important the subject lines are.
Yeah,
So
because it's the first thing that you actually see when you receive an email.
exactly, which is why you should use it to summarize your main questions, your main points.
I have to admit that writing subjects is always an issue for me because I'm always like, what do I write here?
Yeah, I get it. I don't think it's easy to, especially if you have large um, a large pound of ideas that you want
Yeah,
to put into one email. If you want to address a lot of points, and maybe they don't necessarily have something in common, so how
yeah,
do you marry them into a couple of words?
yeah,
Subject lines, they'll be like up to 5 words. I don't
yeah.
think it's easy to sum it up,
And
but
not just write information in the subject line
exactly, and that is definitely a
or
no-no.
questions.
Yes. I mean, questions can be okay if you write them in a smart way. I
Hmm.
mean, an example, you if a retailer has, for example, realized that they've issued an invalid receipt for whichever reason, the reason doesn't matter. Of course, you're not going to write the reason in the subject line, and they want to correct the mistake that they've made. They want to avoid penalties. They could write how to correct an incorrect invoice or correcting an incorrect receipt. Of course, the terminology will vary, and that's something I'll also tackle very quickly. But just try to sum the point up in the title line. Um, and then when we move on to the biggest box of the email where we write the main stuff, um, we first have to write an opening. And at the end, we'll, of course, have to write a closing line. And I'd always advise you to do a little bit of research and investigation of the country's customs. So use those country specific openings and closings. So depending on the country's customs, it may be okay to write dear sir, dear madam, or if you know the person you're addressing, you can say dear and then insert their name or respectfully. Or in certain countries, it's completely fine to just write hi, hello. And the closing lines, I think they are a great opportunity for you to be kind and respectful, to say thank you in advance for your time, for your effort, for your help. I think these kind words can go a long way. It's the little things, the attention to details that matters. So don't try not to be too lazy to write them. I know that sometimes when we have a lot of these changes, we stressed out because of how many unsolved issues we have, but try to pay attention to those details. They can be really, really important. um, and another thing, I think it's a small thing, but it can be really important, and I think Anna will understand why this is important. I think this is a marketing tactic. I may be wrong, correct me, but what I like to do is to write urgent in capital letters in my
Oh yes.
subject lines. Yes, so I signal to tax authorities that this is a time sensitive questions. I trigger a sense of urgency.
Let's put a little pressure.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, but let's put a little pressure on you.
Respectfully, but yeah.
I don't know if you've had luck with getting fast responses if you write that. I personally have.
Always. I think it's like a human psychology. Whenever something is urgent, there's a panic happening and you just have to, get it done and over with.
Yes, I agree. And not just like with writing urgent. I think there are other things that you can write in the subject line to create this sense. For example, some tax authorities, they tend to favor bigger companies, more popular names over the smaller ones. So if you write a company name in the subject line, maybe they'll be prompted to give you a faster response. But again, I just want to go back to the point that I said, don't give out too much personal information. If your situation is a little bit tricky or in the gray area. So
Yeah.
it's really all about walking on that fine thread, finding the balance between what you should include in the email and what you shouldn't. So that's one part of organizing and formatting your emails. But I do have two more things I'd like to talk about within this tip, which is using bullet points and providing options. And I think this is really, really important, especially if you have, let's say, more complex questions. It's great to break them up in multiple smaller questions, or you can decide if you have more questions, you can decide whether you want to send them in separate emails, but sometimes it may be better to include them in one email as a list or as bullet points, or you can ask. I've already said you can ask yes or no questions, but you can also ask or questions, so you can provide options and then ask tax authorities to pick among them. Like we've had situations where we've written out ABC options and they've literally responded with A.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it works. It can be a great
Yeah.
way to save time and to stay efficient, which is what they care about and which is what we care about.
Absolutely. And it's easier for them to just read, and it's very, it's simple. They don't have to think much.
Yes.
They can just choose the option, say yes or no, or if you have multiple questions, put them in bullet points and separate them from the rest of the text written in the email.
Yes.
And they can, number one, this is the answer. Number two, this is the answer.
Exactly. I mean, it all goes back to readability. I think I'm probably going to bore people to death with repeating that one word, but it is so important. I mean, it's a psychological thing. And it leads me to my last bullet point, actually, which is writing shorter paragraphs is always better than just sending in this one large block of text. I think we as people, we tend to gather all of the valuable communication and information by just skimming through the information first, and then we read it thoroughly later. So you want to enable tax authorities to gather as much as valuable information as quickly as possible. And you can do that by achieving readability, by formatting your emails, by organizing them.
Yeah. And so the last tip, number 5.
Actually, I think that's number 4.
Oh, we are number 4. Okay, sorry.
Okay, I get it.
Okay,
It's
go on.
At once.
Go on. I'm just a host here.
I'm sorry.
It's not my area of expertise.
No, I think you can provide a lot of valuable information, and I'm glad that you're adding to what I'm saying. So hopefully you'll have something to add to this as well. And as you can tell, tip number 4 is to communicate your concerns in a simple way. And the main reason why I say this is that think of the tax authority as your target audience. So I'm drawing marketing parallels here. And although they are in charge of interpreting legal documentation, technical documentation, we shouldn't forget that they aren't legislators. They aren't technicians. They don't create these documents that they're interpreting. Tax authorities, they are an administrative body. And while of course, they know legalese, they know this legal and technical slang. If you have a complex question at hand, and if you add complex terminology into it, I think it really impacts the clarity of the questions. So whenever you can, try to minimize the usage of legal and technical slang. Try to communicate your concerns in a simple way using common language that lay people use. So that would be my number one tip within tip number four. I would also recommend that you share your concerns and ideas with the tax authorities. And I think it's not, I think a lot of people don't know this, but it's not that uncommon for tax authorities to receive questions from us, from taxpayers, and then feel inspired to interpret regulation in a certain way, to enable its practical application, to even make changes to the legislation. Last week, I've attended this seminar and I've heard this great sentence that life is far more inventive and faster than law, and that law follows whatever happens in practice. So it's okay and it's beneficial even for you to sometimes share your experiences, to tell the tax authorities, hey, the implementation of this is impossible, it's hard, it's going to be challenging. This is objectively better for everyone, not just for your personal benefit, but for everybody. If you have the experience and the knowledge in the area, it's okay to share it with the tax authorities because they are willing to listen. We've seen it, we've witnessed it. For example, we've seen it in Serbia, where there were at one point back-to-back changes of legislation. And they truly did listen to the feedback of the taxpayers, of the people who were communicating with them. And they did some really amazing changes and updates, not only to laws, but to technical documentation as well. So if the opportunity is right, do tell them what you think that can be done better. But of course, be respectful. I don't think emails are the place to argue, however stressed we are. So just share your ideas, share your concerns, but be respectful. And choose the terminology that you use in your emails wisely. And what I mean by this, and I think I've probably given a sneak peek in explaining, in giving an example for a subject line, and that is that a certain thing may be called differently in two different countries. What we call a receipt may be called an invoice in another country. What we recognize as void of the receipt, maybe someone doesn't. Maybe they only know of returns, of refunds, of corrections of the receipts. So I think some elementary research can be done, some Googling can be done to realize what kind of terminology is being used to describe. Now I'm talking about fiscalization matters, but whatever matter you have, maybe just skim through the laws, see what kind of terminology they're using. I think it can be incredibly helpful. You don't want to create confusion. What are you even asking about? And also, once you're done writing your email, I'd say reread your question one last time before you send it. Try to edit it one more time because this can help you achieve what you're after. Because if you're rereading your email and it seems confusing, it seems like a drag, then you probably need to reword it.
It probably is.
Yeah, it probably is. It's
Yeah.
the common sense, yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a very simple parallel from real life.
Yes.
If you like put earrings and a lot of jewelry, the first thing that you see when you look in the mirror, you have to take it off.
Yes, yes, it's too much. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I think minimalism is trendy nowadays and across different industries, and I support it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I support
Absolutely.
it.
Me too. Okay. Also, I believe that lots of people are sometimes unsure whether to use an email or to use a phone call, how to approach tax authorities, like which channel to use.
Mm,
So could you let us know a little bit about that
yes.
from your
So
experience?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you probably gathered from previous tips that we tend to favor email communication, but I do recommend that you diversify your communication channels. And this is because they'll simply yield different results. It depends what your issue is and what you're after. I always say that email communication is king, and that is primarily because we like to have a written record of the response. Our clients ask us for resolutions of their issues, and we like to back up our answers with official answers. So written records are the best in case things go wrong. But apart from that, I mean, there are many other benefits to email communication, such as we can send quick and simple messages, get to the point quickly. We can get responses in an efficient manner. While I think when we use phone calls or maybe Skype calls or something similar, I think we can get caught up in small talk or lengthy and sideline conversations, which is something that we try to avoid. We try to be efficient, and also I think if you don't get an answer or don't get a satisfying answer, emails are better for following up, and I think following up is really really important. Um, but phone calls do have their advantages. I think if you have a time sensitive question, again, I've mentioned these a couple of times. I think they are a better option. Sometimes we'll fail to trigger this sense of urgency with emails, and usually in those situations, we resort to phone calls. And I have to say, we've had both success and failure with phone calls. And it usually depends on one thing, and that's whether the person we're talking to has sufficient information. Because if they do have information on what we're asking, they are pretty keen to share it with us and pretty thoroughly. They give us detail, they give us procedures step by step. But if they don't, those conversations get sidelined. They can take a wrong turn. Usually, they are a miss in those situations. So, if the phone calls don't work out, I think go back to emails so you have that written record. And especially if you don't have legislation or technical documentation that's actually regulating the question and matter. So emails are better for that. And also, what I would also advise, and I think maybe people don't look at this as at a communication channel, but it is an internal communication channel when you communicate with your team. And this is really important. Employ the rest of your team. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, because we have learned that certain people within our company will yield better results. Some are more charming, some just have the better skill of crafting better emails, of phrasing them in a better, more efficient way. Some are familiar, their name is familiar to the tax authorities because they've communicated a lot with them. So these people will yield better results. You can also send the same question from different emails, yours and your colleagues, or even try to mix it up to use your professional and personal email, whatever works for you. Again, this is a test and trial sort of situation. You can also employ your team to just brainstorm, to gather ideas. What is the best way to craft this email? You can use the valuable tips that they have to apply them to the communication. And I mean, that's what I did when I was crafting these retail talks. When I was thinking how to communicate these ideas, I sat down with my team and I asked them what is their experience, and their experience has been immensely valuable to me. So I like to say that teamwork makes the dream work. It's cheesy.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I absolutely agree. And I think it's very interesting what you said that every person in your team has their how to say things where they are better than others, and it's normal. And that's why you're all a team, because you um, do things for each other in order to get the best results, as a group.
Yes, I think in a company, in any company, you just have to work together. You can't work. You shouldn't work on your own. Why are you making things harder on yourself? I mean, I am very happy that we all function well as a team, and I love to take their tips to improve. They've always been valuable. So maybe this is even the most important part. Please use the resources within your team, within your company. You don't have to do things alone. Um, and now I feel sad that I haven't left this like as a closing line for the tip for number 5. It would have been so impactful, but I guess I still need to study marketing tactics a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't think the last part is any less valuable. I think it's actually really valuable to know this, and that is to consider country specific requirements in emails. And what I mean by this very vague description of my bullet point is that some countries, some tax authorities in different countries just won't respond to your emails if they're in English. They will require you to send emails in their native language. Some won't respond to emails at all. You'll have to use special e-forms. You'll have to know about them to use them. You'll have to maybe even send questions in these special forms, like some tax authorities require you to formalize your question in a PDF form, and then you have to even have a digital certificate and sign it for them to respond to it. Or some even require you to pay to get an answer. So this will vary throughout countries, and you have to explore how these things work. You've said it, we work in over a dozen of countries, so we know their customs. We know what we have to do to get to that information, but the taxpayers don't necessarily know this information. So I'm giving you this exclusive tip. Try to understand the customs and these country-specific requirements. Sometimes you just have to you have to pay for the information, and that's okay. It's important that you know that you have to do it. I think, yeah, that would be the concluding line of this tip number 5, I'd say.
Thank you, Nevena. We have reached almost the end of our retail talk today, and I enjoyed this retail talk actually very much because I personally love these topics where you think like, oh, they're just tips, some like things. I know this, there's no need for someone to explain this to me, but actually it's like small things that actually make a huge impact on the results you get and how fast you can get them and how successfully you can get the tax authorities to provide you with the information that you need. So it was very, very interesting. And I also learned, this actually confirms to me that marketing is everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. I was
Yeah.
astonished once I started getting into the, let's say, science behind the email
Yeah,
communication, how much rooted marketing is into everything. It's
absolutely.
amazing.
Because most of the tips, revolve around copywriting,
Yes,
which
yes,
is our daily activity, mostly what we do in marketing. I mean, besides other activities, but copywriting is one of the most important ones that we do. And
yes.
it was very, very interesting, and I'm sure that it was interesting for our audience as well.
I hope so. I hope it was useful as well.
Yeah, yes. So do you have some final comments on how to communicate? Like, what would be your final advice, your final tip that you can maybe summarize all that you told us today?
Okay. I think I think maybe I didn't cover one thing that could work as a great conclusion, which is sometimes you won't receive an answer at all. Sometimes you'll receive an answer that's insufficient and relevant. I have mentioned that, but um, that isn't a reason for you to just say, "Oh well, I've done everything in my power." But
Yeah.
apparently, this answer is not coming. It's just not happening. I'm giving up. We've honestly had this happen countless times, and at this point, we can even anticipate when it will happen. The longer we wait for a certain response, the higher the chances are that the response either won't come or it will be really generic or vague. And what we all do, and what I would advise everyone to do is to send another question. Just rephrase the initial one if you have to. Try to ask for additional clarification. Tell them how does this response that you've given me applies to my specific situation, or even I'd say even try finding other internal maybe contacts that you can communicate with. Of course, tax authorities are always our primary source. They are official bodies, but don't rely on a single source. You want to have other options. Try having your own internal contacts to communicate with, even if you have to pay them. Some tax authorities are really stingy with information. It can, I know it seems like a lot to pay for the sort of information that should be readily available to you, but ultimately I think it's worth it, because in some countries penalties for non-compliance are really unforgiving. So at the end of the line, paying for the sort of information that you'll get from the tax authorities will be cheaper than paying the penalty. So you have to strike a fair balance to just figure out what's worth it. And I think that would be my conclusion, my final advice, let's say, my recommendation, I think is a better word.
Be persistent.
Be
Right?
persistent. Yes, absolutely. That was, see, we've been talking about these communication strategies for less than an hour, and you've already nailed summing up things. You said you weren't that good at subject lines, but this proves different. I mean, you've gathered some info, you've gathered some knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nevena.
Thank you.
I recommend, if this hasn't shown you this event today, that you should follow Nevena on LinkedIn. I think that you should follow her right now. I put all the links in the comments. You can find them there. So here is Nevena's LinkedIn. So Nevena Gloshets, and here is my LinkedIn. It has some, numbers. If you want to follow me, just copy it from the comments. Also, I want to repeat that our next retail talks will be on July 19th. And the other events where you can educate yourself about fiscalization is Fiscal Talk, our webinars, of course, our LinkedIn page where we offer daily updates on everything fiscalization.
Yes, and you can tell that we're cheerful and relaxed, and we like to provide as much information as we can, so please join us.
Absolutely. So also, I'm very sorry again that the LinkedIn wasn't working today, and I hope that you could all transfer to YouTube. If not, this event is recorded, so you will be able to watch it later. And just to finish this off, I want to mention Ape School again, because Web3 is hot topic right now. If you are not familiar with that, just take a look at what the most famous retailers around the world are doing today, issuing their own NFT collections, moving their businesses to Web3 space, and the numbers of retailers doing this are getting bigger by the day. So we had to be, of course, there as well, which is why we founded Ape School. It's our very innovative project. We had 2 master classes where we taught about basic topics in Web3 space. We have our Discord channel, which, of course, I put the link in the comments. This is the link. And we are preparing our NFT collection. I'm very excited about that, because I'm I'm part of the team on Ape School project. So this actually makes me very excited. Some of the NFTs are already ready, and you can actually see them on Twitter. I put the link to our Twitter profile in the comments. It's called Ape School NFT. So take a look at that. Also, our famous Professor Keating on Twitter follow him, take a look at what we do. If you don't understand for some reason, feel free to contact us, of course, and we will see what we can do for you and help you get your business transferred to or expanded to the Web3 space. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I will see you next time, maybe on some other webinar or next retail talk. Thank you, Nevena, for being my guest today. It was
Thank
a
you for being
pleasure.
amazing host.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you, as always. I'm looking forward to our next event. Since we are meant to be in live events together, I'm sure it will happen soon.
Yes, please come up with another exciting idea. I really, truly have fun when working with you, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to us, and we can't wait to see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye, guys.